Okay, here we are. I am filming my movie for the Oscars, and I am also on the verge of turning the big 3-0. And I have for a very long time wanted to try and film a video about those first 3 decades, as I've begun to call them, and how impactful that is on life, and what all I learned from this time, and what all I can impart upon other people from my life experiences and so forth for any of those who will listen. And I kind of painstakingly went over all of the different kinds of ways and ways I could do that, and video series and writing scripts and trying to come up with this really advanced kind of monologue that I would go through. And every time I tried to commit to writing something down, it just didn't feel quite right, and I just didn't have the motivation. It just wasn't there. And so I found myself here on the Oscar video. This is my fourth Oscar video. I've participated every year. And I have a good buddy of mine who we usually get together and film these, but he was unavailable this particular Sunday. And I was kind of knocking around ideas and like, what am I going to do for this video challenge? Meanwhile, in the back of my mind, the idea of this whole 10-year first 3 decades or whatever is also knocking around in my head. And so I'm kind of like, okay, can I use that to be my video this year? And that's ultimately what I landed on, because I don't have a script for anything and I don't have any of this prepared, but my life stories should be easy enough to pull from off of the top of my head that I can kind of make a full-length film out of this. It's not going to be flashy and attractive in any way, shape, or form. I will probably film, and I already have filmed, a lot of B-roll throughout the day of me just doing chores and non-such stuff, so to give you all something different to look at other than just my mug while I talk to you. But ultimately, it's gonna be just a bit of a conversational piece, just kind of where I am with life, and how, if at all, I can impart some level of knowledge on those of you who choose to sit down and watch this. Um, so the first 3 decades, as I've aptly named this project, I am on the verge of turning 30. I'm not quite there yet. I'm about a couple months shy of it. But I figured now was as good a time as any to make this. I was going to try and make it like actually on my 30th birthday. But again, I was supposed to be this whole scripted to do, and it just didn't turn out that way. But for some of you, I'm sure, who are at or above 30, you're like, ugh, this guy is out here being all egregious about how old he is. And for those of you who aren't quite there, you're probably like, this guy's old as dust and I'm getting out of here. But for the special ones who stuck around, I appreciate it. Well, 30 years is a big amount of time, and in human years, it's not very long. You're still considered to be young at the age of 30. I would say most people even would consider people in their 40s to be young. And the idea of youth and what is young and what is old is a variable thing. Just like so many things in this life, it means one thing to one person and another thing to somebody else. I don't generally consider people to be old anymore until they're in their 60s, but I even still know quite a bit of people who are in their 60s and are in really good shape for their life. And so it's really just kind of what you do with it. But at the same time, like, we still like to have that defining factor. I, for one, have seen an alarming amount of people in my life pass away at the age of 72. So 72 is kind of the number that I have given myself. And in the grand scheme of things, 30 isn't all that far away from it. Like, honestly, 36. If 72 is my number, 36 is the halfway point. So that's a bit alarming to think that I'm just 6 years shy of the halfway point, but all three of my grandfathers passed away at 72. And so that number rings relatively true to me. And I'm like, am I making the most of things in this small window of time that I have? And I tend to think that I am doing a pretty good job at it. Obviously, there's no way to know 1000% how well you did or how well you didn't do. And again, just like everything else in life, that's very subject to change. But I, for one, am happy with where I am presently. Could I be further along that path in this present tense? Absolutely. But am I way behind where I feel like I should be? No, I'm not. And so for someone who's kind of seeing that projection and has that number of 72 in his head, like, I've been building my life around the ability to be able to really capitalize on the years. Because another thing that I have seen an alarming amount of is people who wait until their retirement age and their retirement years to really start to enjoy life. And the amount of time and the amount of enjoyment that they get out of that is slim to none. I mentioned my grandfathers before, who all passed away at 72. One of which I think retired at 65, 68, somewhere around there. And it was probably 65, I think. And got diagnosed with a brain tumor like 2 years after that. And then passed away, however many years is between 68 and 72. And so obviously he didn't enjoy very much of his retirement. He only had maybe like 2 years max of golden retirement age before he started dealing with what he was dealing with. And I had another close friend of mine who was set to retire September of 21. It was the same year that I moved into my house. I moved in August of 21. And he unexpectedly passed away August of that year. And it's like he didn't even get to retirement. Like, we're all working towards this goal of retirement when we are free from the working world. But by that time, you're old and breaking down and have a limited amount of years left. So it's important to me, and by the things that I've experienced and by the things that I've seen and lived through, it's important for me to be able to take in what I can from those experiences, understand what I want out of this life, and how to start working towards getting it. Like I said, having all three of my grandfathers pass away at 72, and then a good friend of mine pass away right before his retirement. I was like, I've got to kind of steer this bus on a better course, because I can't be working, and I'm not necessarily unhappy with my work, but like, obviously you'd always rather be doing something else, or being somewhere else, rather than being at work. Like, if given the choice to go to work or to not, and like I could financially afford to just not, I wouldn't. And I think a lot of people feel that same way. We may not necessarily despise our jobs with all of our passion and soul and fire, but we certainly could be doing more fun things or different things or more passionate things, whatever it may be. And so I steered my goals in my adult years, more of like the years between like 20 and 30, towards trying to set myself up to be able to retire at 45. And that's a pretty lofty goal, especially in this economy. Things are not getting any cheaper, and making your way in life is not any easier now than it was 30 years ago. A lot of people think, like, with the advent of social media, that it is tremendously easier to make your way in this world, and that's just not the case. It's tremendously easier to connect to a larger audience and a bigger group of people, but that doesn't guarantee that you will have success. You have to find a way to resonate with people, or to create something that people need and or want, so much so that they invest in you financially. And that will always be the most challenging part of entrepreneurship. And so even though we're given the perception of easy success from 2025 versus 1995, that perception is very much so skewed by the masses. And it's just, you see a lot more people out there that seem to be successful, and you don't necessarily know everything that's behind that curtain. And so, with that being said, I had the goal in mind, and the modern times make it a different kind of goal, but it doesn't make it tremendously easier than what it was 30 years from now, or 30 years ago, I should say. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I wanted to track down kind of all 30 years, or at least the first 3 decades, as I continually reference in this project. But I want to kind of track down those and talk about that a little bit. Again, 30 years is a big chunk of time, and I know that I have accomplished a lot in that time, and I'm willing to guarantee that quite a few other people watching this probably have as well, if you've reached that. And even if you haven't reached that, if you're just turning 20 or 25 or whatever, you've probably done a decent amount of things in your life. I remember when I hit about 25 or so, that's when I started to kind of realize and be more confident with myself and my life experiences. I didn't feel so much like a kid anymore. Up until 25, I felt like I didn't have much a leg to stand on and much a life to talk about. And I was just kind of absorbing and taking in all that I could. And it wasn't until around that time that I felt comfortable enough to be like, I think I've been around the block on this whole life thing enough now that I can start talking about it and speaking on it and saying things that other people should listen to, or what have you. But traipsing it back to the first 10 decades, obviously 0 through 10, there's not a whole lot that people can accomplish in that time frame in the traditional sense. Like, you think about all the things that a child learns from age 0 to 10, and that is honestly quite the accomplishment. I would wonder if, like, an adult from 10 to 20, or even from 20 to 30, learns as much as a child does between 0 and 10, because, like, you pop out into this world and you don't really know how to do a darn thing. You can't poop and pee for yourself, you can't feed yourself, you can't really do hardly anything. And in between that time period of 0 and 10, you learn a whole lot of basic life skills that obviously you continually need to know how to do. You need to know how to walk, you need to know how to use the restroom, you need to know how to feed yourself, you need to know how to communicate. All of these things that are blasé and that we take for granted as human adults because we've been doing them for 20 plus years now, or whatever it may be. At one point in time, we weren't doing that. So to just brush off the first 10 years is like, oh, that was a waste of my time. I didn't really do anything. You did do a lot. You just don't realize how much you did, and you don't remember doing a lot of it. For me specifically, the standout thing, obviously, of those first 3 decades is surviving cancer. That was a huge thing. I was diagnosed when I was 6, and I was officially cancer-free when I was 9. I believe that's when I stopped treatments. And so it was like, about 3 years then that I was doing chemotherapy and the whole bit. And that was, that shaped me a lot more later on that I realized it. Like, it shaped me a lot at the time, but I didn't realize it till later on down the road. But like, being that close to the end at that young of an age really does change your mindset. And I feel like a lot of people have life-changing events that happen in their life that alters their mindset and helps them kind of reassess where they need to be. But I could have very easily been done and over with by age 6 at that point, and I would have had not much of a life at all. But here I am now talking about 3 decades worth of life behind me. So super happy about that. Obviously, that was definitely the biggest portion of those first 10 years for me, and fittingly so. And it shaped, like I said, my mind in a great multitude of ways. Age 6 seems to be an awfully young age to start really kind of hating God, but that really was the year that it started happening. I can remember pretty distinctively when I was going through it all, and we went to visit my family, and my like immediate family, we were never very religious. My parents kind of left it up to us to believe what we wanted to believe, but I can remember going to visit our extended family, and my grandparents were always very religious, and we went to their church, and so many of them were talking about how they were praying for me or whatever, and I didn't fully comprehend or understand like what they were talking about, but it seemed really bizarre that like if this person existed who had the power to fix this, then like why did they allow it to happen to begin with? And I'm not really looking to turn this into a religious debate, and my feelings on the matter go a lot deeper than that surface level stuff, but that was really kind of my mindset as a 6-year-old child as I was observing the world and taking things in and fighting for my life at the same time through cancer. So I can just distinctively remember that was when those first kind of thoughts of atheism, if you want to call it that, anti-religion, whatever you want to call it. I'm not aggressively against it. I just don't partake in it myself. But at any rate, that was a very formative thing, because that is still to this day a very strong stance and opinion that I hold to this day. And like part 2 of that story is when the chemotherapy was done and the fighting was done and I was free from that curse, so to speak. And I go back to visit the extended family, go back to that church environment, and they're praising God and thanking him for all of the miracles that he bestowed upon me. And again, maybe a bit of a selfish way to think about it, but I'm like, why does he get all the credit for all the work that I put in to save my own self from my own prison and my own vices and the things that I had to deal with and all the horrible stuff that I went through while I was dealing with that and just the unimaginable pain? But yet for some reason it's, oh, thank God that that is gone, and thank God that he did his work and was a miracle worker. And it just did not resonate with me, and still does not to this day, and never will. But again, that's not the point of this, but my stance on spirituality is a big portion of who I am. It's a big portion of who a lot of us are. And so to just kind of blasé over that isn't necessarily fair. But like I said, I don't want to turn this into a religious debate either. But those are probably the biggest things that I did get out of those first 10 years. Like I said before, we all learn the basic stuff. Well, for the most part, we all learn the basic stuff. We can poop, we can pee, we can eat, we can go to the bathroom, we can talk, we can walk, we can do all that stuff. And then, of course, there's kind of the more advanced stuff for me with the whole very early on facing death head on and doing my darndest to make it through that. And how that formed my views on the world at a very young age, and how that matured me very quickly. There's like a condition that they say that like most children, when they have an episode of some sort of like major trauma or something, that it progresses their mind backwards and they like demature, so to speak. And I think there is some truth to that, because I've always been, and I don't know how much of that is because of this or how much of it is just because of who I am, but I've always been a very lighthearted individual. I'm not immature by many means, but I don't take things too seriously. I never have. And I think part of that plays into the idea that like having had such a kind of big, impactful, traumatic thing happen at age 6 has kind of stuck with me and kept me in that kind of uplifting mindset that a 6-year-old might have. But to the same end, it did mature my mind significantly down the line. And a lot of this I didn't realize until I got older and could really start to process my thoughts on the matter. But all of those intrinsical thoughts and opinions did start very seriously that early on in life for me. And you can think and feel one way about it, but that's just kind of where it landed for me. So my stance on spirituality, my belief in making the most of what little time we had, because it is precious and it could have been cut away at me at age 6 or 7, 8 or 9, really. And so to be here 30 years later still talking about it is a good thing and a big thing that I can't give enough credit to. But I think that pretty well summarizes like the first 10 years of my life's journey. Moving on to the next 10 years, and that is 10 through 20. That's the adolescence stage, teenage years, a lot of finding yourself at this time, but really not at all either. I certainly didn't find myself until the last decade, the 20 through 30 decade. That was really when I did a lot of soul searching and figuring out who I am as a person and how me as a person operates, what makes me tick, what do I enjoy, what do I not enjoy, what do I want, and what do I not want. 10 through 20 is a lot more difficult of a time to summarize. Like, there's a lot that happened there. At the start of the decade, you're still very much so just a child. But then by the end of that decade, you're a full-blown adult with responsibilities potentially, and everything in between it. I'm trying to think, age 10, is that like elementary school? I guess it's when you really start like exploring the world around you and you really start to become a person outside of your immediate upbringing. I know I've spoken with a lot of parents who are always thrown back by when their children come home from school and start kind of forming their own opinions that maybe don't resonate exactly with the parents' opinion. They're like, what's going on here? Where are you learning all these things? And it's from school, it's from all those lovely outside resources, and some of them are great and some of them are awful. And it's up to us to just kind of navigate the ups and downs of that adventure. But the reality of it is that is part of, I think, growing up. And I know a great deal of people who are like homeschooled and they do wonderfully for themselves, but I can't help but wonder if some bit of that social aspect is lost there. And is that for the better? Is that for the worse? I don't know. Again, this isn't a video to debate that, but it is a video to observe kind of the human condition through my own experience and through my own eyes. And what did I really start to learn at that time, and what did I really start to understand? And like empathy probably is a big one, like learning how to see things through other people's eyes. I can remember there's a great deal of things that like I clung to, a lot of thoughts and ideas that I clung to as a child that came directly from like my parents or the people before me or whomever else. And I was able to break down a lot of that through those years and through those friendships because they challenged those thoughts and processes and were like, is that really the way to go, or is that really the way to think? And there is no singular definitive way to think or to go about doing any of these things. And being able to see multiple perspectives and understand different ways that things can happen is a huge benefit in that regards, and it does wonders to becoming the full-fledged person that we want to be, or that we hope to be at least. And so I think that's the biggest thing, at least from those first years, 10 through 20. I'm trying to think about what I did through that decade that would be like worth mentioning. I feel like so many things happened between 20 and 30, but that's also probably because it's what's fresh in my mind, that to sit down and think about 10 through 20, it's a little bit more difficult. This is a section that I probably should have taken notes on. My teen years were a great period of time. I did musical theater throughout my high school, and I can remember and multiple people kind of point towards this as well. I was always more reserved and inside myself as a younger individual. I was not out there and speaking, and I would have never have done anything like this prior to musical theater. And a great deal of what helped me through that, and this will sound probably conceited or whatever you want to call it, but it's the truth, and I'm going to tell it that way. But part of that is being in musical theater, I saw a lot of the people that I would consider to be much weirder than myself and how comfortable they were with just being themselves. And I was kind of like, well, if these weirdos over here are completely comfortable with being who they want to be, then why can't I be comfortable being who I am? Because I'm not nearly as weird as they are. Like, they're like 100% weird. I'm only like 30% weird. And so that really did help kind of push me in the right direction to really start getting things and getting my mindset right and getting things where they needed to be. I can, like I said, I can point, a lot of people will point to that and they're like, that was like a definitive flip in your life where you went from like shy, reserved person to out there and just living life and being yourself and really just expressing yourself in a very healthy way. And I can acknowledge that. I can look back at that and I can acknowledge that as well. And that was one of the bigger things that I got out of the high school experience is my ability to express myself in a healthy way. There's a great multitude of ways that people can express themselves, and some of them are healthy, some of them are not. But so that's absolutely one of the biggest things. Trying to think of like from 19 to 20, like what was going on in my life. I think a lot of it was just starting to really understand kind of my work ethic and how that was going to form and how that was going to become what it is. I started my first full-time job at 19. I was a cart pusher at Home Depot, and I started in 2015, which I actually would have turned 20 that year, but I started in March of 2015, and I wouldn't have turned 20 until May. And so that was my first full-time job. I went to school, like college-wise, immediately after high school, and ultimately I feel like that was a mistake because when I graduated high school, I was very excited to be done with school. I didn't want to be doing school anymore. I'd been doing it for 12 years. I was kind of over it. And so I was very excited to be done with it. But then, of course, I went immediately into college and I burnt myself out pretty quick. I went for a 2-year certificate in what was it, in networking. I really did enjoy the web design program. If I had stuck with college, I probably would have changed my degree to web design because I found that to make a lot more sense and to be a lot more fun. But at any rate, the program was kind of a mess. I was going to some local community college and I was getting my tuition paid for through this A+ program that our school offered. And it was the second to last semester, something silly like that. And I was supposed to take a prerequisite math class, and they signed me up for the actual math class. And so then when they contacted me about the issue, it was the day that open enrollment ended. And so they called me in and they're like, hey, so open enrollment's over and we just now realized this thing with your schedule, but since open enrollment's over, we're gonna have to just not give you your scholarship this semester and you have to pay out of pocket. And I was like, well, that's kind of lame. I don't think that I wanna do that. So I didn't, and I was only working at Subway at the time, part-time, mind you, and I wasn't going to be able to afford to pay my tuition on that, and I wasn't going to put out a loan for it either. So I went and joined the workforce with every intention of going back, but one thing led to another, and I just never got back around to it. But yeah, so that would have been around 2014, probably fall of 14, when the whole college thing fell out. And then I got a job working at, I might bleep out that name because I don't know that I want that coming back to me, but I was working at a photography, like processing plant kind of place, and they hire a bunch of people on part-time, and then they will hire you on or keep you on full-time if you perform well during their busy season. So they start hiring people on in the fall, like October time, and those people will work through Christmas, and then New Year they will either let you go or they'll keep you, depending. And that was by far one of the most interesting working environments I've been a part of. It was definitely I learned a lot there, but it was definitely kind of eye-opening to like the real world and how it functions. So they hired on all these part-time people with the promise of full-time employment if you outperform their current full-time people. So like basically they had like 10 full-timers, and then they would hire on, I feel like 10 to 15 of our part-time people. And they probably hired on heavy because they knew so many people would fall off because the hours were stupid. I remember I was young at the time, and I thought that I was really just rolling in the dough. I was making like $8.15 an hour, but we would work during the busy season. We would work 16-hour shifts Monday through Friday and 12s on Saturday and Sunday. And so like my checks were humongous because of the overtime pay, which is wild to think about. I say they were humongous. They were big for a 18-year-old, but for me, like today, I think I'm making more than I was making then, and thankfully so. But still, at any rate, I thought that I was really doing well for myself because here I was making all this money, but I was working my life away and in excess too. Like those hours are just an absolute monstrosity. But it was not a healthy work environment either, because they openly like encouraged that competition between the people they hired on and the people who are there full time. And because they told the full timers to their face, and they told us to our face. They're like, hey, if you outperform our full time techs, you got a job, and the full time people are out of here. And so it created all this nasty, gross friction because the full time people didn't want to train the part time people. So the part time people had to figure out the work for themselves, and it was just a nasty, gross environment. Ultimately, when the season was over, Christmas was over, because they released their rankings publicly too. Like they would publicly rank like how many orders you shipped out, how many mistakes you made, all these things, and they had this calculator that would average out your score, and they would post that so that you knew how well you were doing. And I was ninth place, so they had 10 full-timers. So I was ninth place, which means that I should have been hired in. And there was a lady who started around the same time as me, and she was ranked seventh. And so it came time, New Year's, they were taking us in, telling us whatever they got to tell us. And I can remember that they let me go. And they're like, yep, you did great work. It was a great season for you. Really wish we could keep you, but we can't. And I was kind of like, I was way too young at the time to challenge them on it. But in my head, I was like, wait, you hired me on like with the promise that if I outperformed your full-time people, I would get hired. And I did that, and I didn't get hired. But then I was like, I was ninth place. I was like right at the tippy top of their register. Maybe that's why they were just like, it's like, we're not going to risk it with this new kid when we have these people who've been here for longer. I was like, fine, that's whatever. But then I was talking to that other woman who they hired around the same time as me, the lady who was ranked in seventh place, and she got let go as well. And I was like, well, dang, like they didn't plan on hiring any of us, did they? They just brought us in, gave us this promise, worked us like dogs, and then kicked us on out the door. And so that was a valuable lesson, and something that I frequently go back to if I ever feel that I'm wronged or in some weird place with my current life situation. But at any rate, so yeah, that was my first full-time job was that. But then I got hired on full time at Home Depot, 19-year-old pushing in carts. It was a gig. It turned into a whole big old thing too. I stayed there for, shoot, was it 6 years? I didn't leave until March of 21. So yeah, from 15 to 21 would be 6 years. And then I would start the hospital, which is my current and main gig. I started that at 22, age 22, not year 22. Started that at age 22 in 2017, and have been working it since. We're going on, we just hit 7 years, and we'll be going on 8 this October. And so this is now the longest job that I've held. But yeah, just a lot of basic kind of life stuff coming out of the 10 to 20 range. The 20 to 30 range is a pretty exciting time for me. I had a lot of visions at that time that I wanted to bring to life and start working towards, and that was kind of exciting. In 2020, which I would have been 25 in 2020. So yeah, in 2020, we'll hold on that for now. I'm getting ahead of myself. I just have so many things to talk about. But so yeah, in 2017 is when just like I just mentioned, when I started my current role, and I was 22 at the time. And then I started kind of, so the year before that, 2016, I started like, signposting, I guess, my life. And I started to be like, okay, on these milestone birthdays, I want to do X, and I want to do Y, and I want to do Z. And I can remember around the time that I graduated, I can remember sitting down and talking to my parents and asking them, like, what are the biggest expenses that the average adult will pay for in their lifetime? And the biggest ones that they mentioned was a mortgage and a car payment. And so I was like, okay, so I want to dedicate my time as this young individual to eliminating or greatly reducing my mortgage and my car payment so that I can live a significantly more financially stable life. I never want, and I still don't want to be like filthy, stinking rich. I just want to be financially comfortable in life. And I'm thankful that I believe that I have accomplished that. Not that I'm going to just sit back now and enjoy the show. I'm still going to strive for better, but I think that I have accomplished that. So it was decided at the time that I was going to start with the car because that was the cheaper of the two. And then I was going to tackle the house thing, and then whatever came next came next. And that was 2013. I graduated in 2013. And I bought my car outright in cash in 2016. And that was through the savings that I had at that bizarre place, the photo place that I told you about that was competitive and gross. And then that was through my savings at Home Depot as well. And so 2016 would have been my 21st birthday. So we're officially in the 20 to 30 realm now. And so for my 21st birthday, I bought myself a car, and that was such a great experience. I go back to that experience pretty frequently. I've always lived life on my own terms, and when I decided that I was going to buy this car, I decided I was going to buy it literally in cash, because like who can go down and say that they literally bought a car in cash? Not very many people. So I was like, I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to do that. And I made a whole video on that. It's on this channel. I'm not going to dive super deep into it. If you're super interested in my car story, like I said, there's a video on this channel about it, or I don't know, hit me up and I'll tell you, I guess. I don't know. So at any rate, the car thing was done, 21st birthday, boom, car payment's out of the way. Now I got to start working towards the mortgage. And the idea at the time was the very same thing that I did with the car. I was just going to save up an obscene amount of money, and then I was going to dump a large payment down on a house, and I'd be able to afford a decent mortgage based on that. And as time started to kind of creep closer to that, we're talking, because I wanted to have the house by 25. So that would have been 2020 that I was really starting to think about it. I think it was more 2019 though that I was really starting to think about it, because what ultimately happened was I bought a plot of land, and then me and my brother built my own house. and I was able to save exponentially on the price of a home because the labor cost was mostly done in-house, and then it was just material costs that I had to worry about. So, but yeah, in 2019, just happened upon this plot of land, and it was in a great spot, and it all just kind of fell into place, and it really worked out. And then I dedicated my time to helping to build the place, and then I got in, and my mortgage is like $400 a month. So that is a pretty good accomplishment. I would say that I set out in 2013 to eliminate or greatly reduce my mortgage and my car payment, and I would say that by 2021 I had done that. I had bought the car in 2016, and I had built the house and moved in by 2021. And so I have been kind of coasting for the last, 4 years now. And I kind of did that on purpose. I wanted to kind of understand, because I was out on my own. Before 2021, I just lived with my folks the entire time. And so I wanted to get used to living out on my own, seeing what that was like, get used to being in a house and living and just kind of being that way. I also have progressively grown in my job as well. I was hired on as a clerk making $13.50, and then moved my way all the way up to a manager, and I'm making significantly more than $13.50 now. And so I am thankfully in a very good spot. 2020 was also a big year for me because that was when I published my first novel. I've had the luxury of being able to pursue my creative pursuits, which is amazing. It's great, and a lot of work, and a lot of that falls on me and my own dedication to the work. But it's also just great that I have the time and the freedom to be able to do that. And I can't overlook and appreciate enough like how much having the time and freedom to do that means to me. Like being able to do it, like part of that, a good part of that falls on me, and I acknowledge that. But a good part of that falls on like my circumstances as well, which I am also responsible for, but not 100%, maybe more like 85. But at any rate, so yeah, I wrote my first novel in 2020, and I've managed to write a novel every year since then. I actually have 6 books out, and so if you do the math, well, actually that 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, that tracks, because I always get mixed up when you include the zeros or whatever. But at any rate, got 6 books out. I've got my own cartoon now that I'm working through on YouTube, and things are just really in a good place. And this is all what I've managed to accomplish in 30 years, which by most people's standards is a short period of time, and people in their 30s are still young, and I don't disagree with that. But that's also to say, like, you can do a lot with a little bit of time. And if people watch this all the way through, my goodness, if you watch this all the way through, like, thank you first and foremost. But secondly, like, I hope it gives you some inspiration, because everybody needs that kind of kick in the pants and be like, man, like this dude was able to do all this stuff before he even hit 30. Like, what am I doing? Like, I want to do something, and like, go do it. Like, that is ultimately why I tell these stories and why I say these things, is because I want to inspire other people to go and do what I did. And I talked about gaining confidence and stuff at age 25. And like, I try to impart as much knowledge as I can on people and be like, hey, like, I think it'd be a really great idea if you did this, or if you're struggling with that, have you tried this or whatever. And some people take it, some people don't. That's their prerogative. But that's ultimately what brought me here, making this video for you all right here and now, is just the idea that like, I wanted to make a video that summarizes my existence for these first 3 decades and inspire people who are at 30, above 30, below 30, wherever they fall on the age spectrum, inspire them to do what they feel they need to do. And the biggest part of the whole thing is like finding myself. And that was a great deal of what I did in the 20 to 30 range, is understanding who I am, what I want out of this life, and how I can go about doing it. And once I got all that kind of stuff straightened out, it was a lot easier. Not to say that it's easy by any means, and the struggle never stops. I'm constantly struggling with my own mind and trying to keep myself on the path, but at least knowing what the path is a huge help. And I feel like a lot of people rush into things at a very young age before they fully understand who they are. And now, next thing you know, they've got a whole family and a whole laundry list of responsibilities. And they really just want to sit down and understand, like, who am I and what do I want out of this life? And they don't give themselves the proper time to invest in themselves and to really understand that. And so if you're someone who's in that situation, hopefully this can help you kind of find a way to kind of bring it all back and be like, let me figure out who I am. What do I want out of this life, and how do I get there? The phrase that I like to use is there's multiple ways to win at the game of life. And in order to win at the game of life, you must first define what winning is for you. Winning for me has actively changed, but at one point in time, it was just to live a financially comfortable life. But I'm there now. And so now that I've accomplished that, it's time for the sequel game of life, so to speak, where I seek out a way to become inspirational and influential on a bigger, grander scale. I don't necessarily need to be like world famous or anything, but I would like for my books to be successful and read by many people and enjoyed by a decent crowd of people. I'd like for my YouTube channel to get a healthy amount of views. I'd like for my cartoon to have a small cult following. And those are the kinds of goals that I'm dedicating myself to now. And I have time to make videos, and I make videos, and I have a pretty stout amount of people who come by and give me their thoughts from time to time, and I'm very appreciative of that. But for those of us who don't know, just take a lot of time, or even just take a day. Like if you don't have a lot of time at your disposal, just take a day to be like, I'm gonna just focus on me and try and better understand what I want. And also understand that focusing on yourself and trying to align your what you're doing with those goals is never going to be, it's not just like a thing where you decide, okay, this is what I want, and then you just move towards it. Like you will be constantly working towards that, but just knowing what that end goal is or where your progress is headed is so beneficial. And I can't say that enough, to just take the time to get to know you and understand you. And that was the biggest takeaway that I had from the 20 to 30 range. And yeah, just bringing us all the way over here back to square one, the first 3 decades. What did we learn from each one? What did we get out of each one? Just the basics was learned, obviously 0 through 10. My mindset was kind of set at that point in time as well. Spirituality was figured out around that point in time as well. 10 to 20 is really just kind of letting the outside influences influence you and figure out what influences are good, what influences are bad, and how to navigate yourself from there. 20 to 30 was really kind of finding myself, establishing myself, and starting kind of my creative endeavors. And then, like, what do I plan on the next 3 decades? It feels weird to speak it into existence, but here we are, so I might as well make a goal for myself so that if I make it to 60 and I do a video on the next 3 decades, so to speak, I'd love to start a family, hopefully sometime before I'm 40. I would love to obtain some significant following online, whether that be through my books or through my YouTube or through cartoons or whatever it is that I'm doing. If I could get a decent enough following to hopefully walk away from the traditional working world, that would be excellent, but I'll take whatever I can get in that regards. And I want to come up with 3 things because I've got 3 decades. So if I dedicated 30 to 40 to the family thing, and then 40 to 50 to maybe hopefully finally getting somewhere creatively. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. And then 50 to 60, I don't know. 50 to 60 might just be enjoying life. If everything goes according to plan, I'll be retired by 45. And so hopefully that 50 through 60 range is just me living my best possible life ever. But yes, this has been The First 3 Decades by Lachlan L. Smith. L.L. Smith is my pen name. I write books. I have my own animation on YouTube. I make YouTube videos about story-based games that I enjoy far too much and take way too seriously. And I also make random short-length films because I like boycotting the Oscars and I think Joe Haver is hilarious. So this has been The First 3 Decades. If by some miracle you made it this far, thank you is not 2 words big enough to express how I feel, but thank you is what I got. So hopefully this was beneficial to you. Hopefully this can be inspiring to you, and go out there and make the best of your first 3 decades, your next 2 decades, your half decade, whatever period of time you need to make the best of. Go out there and make the best of it. Thanks for watching.